But I want to dive into a piece called the Talent Tapestry, because I really want to talk about, if we think back to what I said about Usain Bolt, the reason he became the world's best sprinter was because he was so passionate about it. He also had the right team in place to do that. But it was very much a running, and everything he achieved on the running track was very much in line with his values, his passion, his purpose, plus what he'd been designed to do well. There is no question that his physiology helped him become one of the best athletes of all time. And to stick with that theme, I want to talk about how we can use this blend of passion, profit, and purpose, plus our skills or proficiency, as we put it here. So we've got the 4 Ps around really making our business, or us within our business, at world class. But I've had a few people in the group specifically asking how. So I've just qualified for the Ironman World Championships in Hawaii, which has been at the top of my bucket list in terms of fitness for quite a while. And I've had a few of the existing members asking me how I managed to do that. I think that was kind of like out of surprise as much as anything. But actually, it's an interesting journey. So I'm going to start this because ultimately it takes account of my passion, my proficiency, my purpose, and probably not the profit thing. I mean, that profit thing goes to Ironman, I think. But so essentially, I thought about this when I was asked about it. I thought, well, okay, where did all of this start? And if we go back 12 years, I was 3 stone heavier than I am today. I'd never run more than 6 miles in my life. I hadn't been on a bike since I was a kid. I hadn't swum since we were at school. And I wasn't particularly good at swimming then. So the idea of even running a marathon at that point, I remember my dad saying years ago, "Oh, I wish if I hadn't had children when we did, I'd have wanted to do the London Marathon." And I said, I can't think of anything I'd rather do less than run the London Marathon. I always describe running as fun, with all sport with all the fun bits removed. It just did nothing for me at all. But when around that time in 2011, 2012, somewhere around that, I went to a coaching workshop by Tony Robbins, decided, right, okay, I need to, basically what Tony did so well at Unleash the Power Within, which is his 4-day event made most famous by his Firewalk, is he gave us massive leverage. It became really apparent to me over the first couple of days that I'd got to start taking my health seriously and my time seriously, because otherwise I was going to miss my young children growing up, and I was also going to be in a state not to be able to enjoy, my life or my children growing up if I carried on the journey that I was on from a fitness and health point of view. So he gave me what I needed to do, but the problem is with any type of coaching, knowing what you need to do is not enough. Why you need to do it is so much more important. And what he did really well at that event is what he called the Dickens process, which I've shared with some of you in this room before. But he gave us massive leverage. He meant that when I left that event, I knew why it was absolutely vital that I got myself into physical shape and I sorted out my work-life balance. And I had massive leverage because I had this vision in my brain, which again I've shared with a few of you, as to what life was going to be like 20 years from now if I didn't do this. So what did I do? Well, I came out of that event. I was like, right, I'm going to have to take things seriously, change my diet for a while. That seemed to feel good. So I kind of stuck with it with some amendments. But I started setting myself goals. And one of those goals was to do a 100-mile bike ride, which was, I actually did a couple of those in the early stages. This was the Ride 100, like the cycling equivalent of the London Marathon. It's easier than the London Marathon. It's actually slightly more scenic than the London Marathon. Actually, I think I probably enjoyed it more than the marathon. But 100-mile bike ride was a big goal for me at the time. Fee, do you recognise a couple of faces in there? Yeah. Excellent. So anyway, we did this. I did this with a couple of friends, and then and I suppose I'd liken it back to what we do within the trusted team. it was the goal setting process that got me from doing nothing to completing 100-mile bike rides. And ultimately, that's like the limitless life planner that we talked about within, it was in a very early stage at that point, but the limitless life planner is the tool that I use to set the goals and also then to make sure that those goals get achieved. So then that kind of led me on to a point where I realized that I needed to set goals in different areas of my life. And that's how that goal setting evolved. And what I did was I was getting towards the end of a year that would have been about 2015, I think it was. And I'd done a couple of 100-mile bike rides. I'd done a 142-mile bike ride around the Welsh Mountains the year before. And I was like, well, okay, what's my fitness goal for the next year? Is it just another slightly longer, slightly hillier bike ride? And I was reading Rich Roll's Finding Ultra. And I was like, oh, I suppose I could do a triathlon. Never, Rich Roll turns 40, recovering alcoholic, horribly overweight, decides he's going to try and do 7 Ironmans in 7 days on 7 Hawaiian islands. And he actually does it, but in 10 days. What's more remarkable, so he writes the book about that. The guy that he did it with only had one arm. So the guy who only had one arm didn't write the book about it, Rich Roll, but it is absolutely incredible. So anyway, I was like, well, okay, I could do a triathlon. So going back to the goal setting that we talked about through Strategic Coach, through Tony Robbins, through Brian Tracy, I was like, well, okay, if I'm going to do a triathlon, what does the longer term goal look like? I was like, well, okay, the ridiculous thing is to follow Rich Roll's example and put an Ironman on my 3-year goals. So the Ironman went on my 3-year goals, but at this point, I'd still never run more than 6 miles in my life. So I thought, well, okay, the 1-year goal is to do a couple of sprint triathlons, Olympic distance triathlon, and maybe a half Ironman. By the way, for those of you that don't kind of speak triathlon, a half Ironman is way easier than a full Ironman. So anyway, I did that, and I did my first sprint triathlon. I did 2 or 3 of those. Then I went up and did the Olympic distance triathlon at the water called the Dam Buster. Did actually get to it's just shy of a half Ironman later on that year, which is called the Vitruvian. So that is a 50-ish mile bike ride after a 1.2 mile swim and a 13-mile run at the end of it. So that was good progress for year 1. Kind of gave me an understanding of what triathlon was all about. And then what happened was when I started to speak triathlon and understand what that all meant, one of the guys I had started swimming with introduced me to a program called Training Peaks. And Training Peaks is how you measure and plan. So it measures everything that you've done previously, and it allows you to plan what's important to you in the future. So and when we talked about the successful business scorecard in the Trusted Team before, we talked about, well, you measure what matters, and what gets measured gets done. So by bringing an awareness to what you're doing in your business, you would make sure you achieve your results. And in fitness, it's the same. Whether you're measuring it on a watch, whether you're measuring on a ring, whether you're measuring it in Training Peaks, that training plan, and in the early days, it was a very, very basic training plan. But by measuring what I was doing and having a plan to say, yes, I ticked that off, it made a massive difference. The other thing that then started to happen around that time in the lead up to my first Ironman. So I did 2 years of kind of doing other triathlons. And then I went, right, okay, now I know what is involved in an Ironman. I will do that next year. So that was the 3rd year. So pretty much 3 years, certainly within the 3 years, 3 years minus a couple of months, I did the Ironman after putting it on my 3-year goals. Now, I had no expectation that was possible. Zero. I honestly, normally with goals, I like to share them with other people to give you accountability. For that one, I didn't tell anyone because I thought it was the most ludicrous thing ever. But sure enough, 3 years in, I was booking Ironman Italy, and the one habit, and we've talked about in the Trusted Team, the habit compound. Habits are such a powerful tool in anything like this when you're trying to achieve anything new or important. And I developed the habit of rising early. And rising early meant that actually suddenly I could go from doing a little bit of training and keeping vaguely fit to doing training every day and getting to the point where I could do an Ironman. So Exactly the same as, in the habit compound. I just used that to build up to Ironman Italy, and I said to people I wanted to do under 12 hours, which a couple of people have said, wow, that would be amazing if you do under 12 hours in your first Ironman. I actually did 11 hours and 1 minute, so I completely blew that away. Of course, what did I think? That 1 minute, there's 10 things I could have done differently, and it would have been a sub 11. Anyway, that's the never-ending battle. And then as a result of that, we kind of created. I created the Triathlon podcast, which Claire now co-hosts with me. It's now called the Business of Endurance podcast. So we've and through that, I started exploring different people. And this is kind of where we're heading with this concept of the Talent Tapestry. I started bringing in my business expertise, my fitness, my experience of learning from others, and putting that together. And that's where the podcast emerged from and helped accelerate. Although what it did do is it also started making me go, oh, that's a nice shiny thing over there. I'm going to go do that ultramarathon, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I want to do the Norseman. And what I found was I was doing more and more crazy things. And this was a photo of us doing the 50-mile ultramarathon around the Cornish coastline, which is an extremely hilly coastline. And it was great. But actually what it did is it started taking my eye off the ball. I started not doing as well in Ironman because I was doing the other crazy stuff. I was also starting to get injured more often. So actually what happened was it was like, well, okay, yes, that's a fun, shiny thing, but it's not my core focus. I need to go back to, if I really want to master this Ironman thing, I've got to focus on Ironman. I can't be running around Cornish coastlines and for a whole day. And so ultimately, that's what led me on to focusing purely back on the Ironman stuff, doing Ironman South Africa. But interestingly, so we were talking about this yesterday, Steve. We've mentioned already that in business, we need to have the ideal client. There's no point in pitching to the wrong client, because it's either, you either become a busy fool or you're totally wasting your energy. So in order to find my way to get myself to the Ironman World Championships, I knew I needed to pick the best race possible for me. And for a list of reasons that I won't bore the non-triathletes in the room with, Ironman South, I paid a coach called Coach Cox to work with me, look at my strengths and weaknesses, look at the different races that are out there, look at all the different pros and cons. And between us, we concluded that Ironman South Africa was the best place for me to qualify for Kona. So we had, my ideal client was Ironman South Africa. And as a result, when I raced in April, I managed to finish 4th in my category. There was 4 slots available. So if I'd finished 5th, I wouldn't have gone to Kona, but I finished 4th, got my slot to Kona, and in October, I'll be racing in the Ironman World Championships. So I suppose the point of sharing that is, as well as telling you the story of how I got there, actually, it's exactly the same stuff that I'm coaching you guys with in the Trusted Team. Whether you apply it to business or whether you apply it to other areas in your life, it's all the same stuff. It's about the habits. It's about setting the goals. It's about identifying your ideal clients. It's about measuring what matters. It's about gaining massive leverage. Now, we've done a piece on leverage right at the start of the Trusted Team called The Why Beneath. But when I think you're ready for it, I've got a leverage one similar to what Tony took me through, kind of building up to delivering. It will be quite intense, I think. So at some point we'll do that. But ultimately, it's also about progress, not perfection. No point along the way was I thinking, God, I executed that perfect. It was all about, like I mentioned, the game of games that we've done. It was always about, right, okay, well, this worked well, but this didn't work well. What can I do differently next time to make that work better? How can I eliminate that? How can I create? I've got my own outstanding operations for triathlon. And I'm sure you guys have, whether it's tick lists, whether it's, the day before the race, do this. Claire and I have worked out what my ideal nutrition plan is for the whole week leading up to the race. Morning of the race, during the race, after the race. After the race is easy. It's loads of pizza, loads of wine, and then a burger and a steak when you can stomach it. But it's all about innovation and kind of mastering that process and about those marginal gains. picking the little gains up time and again. And, you know, with goal setting, I've said it so many times, but we massively over-expect. We think we can achieve more in the short term, but we massively underestimate what we can achieve in the long term. By that progress, not perfection, we can achieve a huge amount. So that's really what we're going to be talking about with the Talent Tapestry. And of course, there's so many examples of this in business. And it's that unique, like if you think about my Talent Tapestry, it is, okay, so I seem to be built for endurance sport. I never appreciated that as a kid, but I actually seem to be physically built pretty good for endurance sport. I seem to have naturally trained quite well for that. The idea of running around the school sports field was just like this running track at school was just my worst nightmare. But actually, as it turns out, if I train well, I'm actually quite good at that. But this constant innovation, you know, constantly, right, okay, I'm going to do this, right, I'm going to read 3 books on it, I'm going to work out how I can do it better. That is part of my unique ability. Part of my unique ability is simplifying things and kind of taking the complex and translating it to other people in a simpler way. That has all helped me getting to Kona. And ultimately, if we think about Steve Jobs, you know, Steve Jobs had an incredible eye for detail in terms of the aesthetic appearance of things. And that actually comes from a number of different things. His dad was a cabinet maker, so the concept of things looking nice was instilled in him right from an early age. He also studied calligraphy. You know, actually one of the reasons why Apple became very successful. Yeah, so the cabinet making, the calligraphy was all part of what made him have this amazing aesthetic appreciation. He obviously had his technical expertise, but he also had a visionary consumer insight. You know, he knew what people wanted before they wanted it. They wanted 1,000 songs in their pocket. They didn't want 1,000, 100 CDs in their pocket. So people couldn't see that, but he could see it. J.K. Rowling, her 3 areas were passion for storytelling. So J.K. Rowling, as a kid, was writing fantasy stories for her sister to read. She had an education in the classics, so she understood what good storytelling was all about. But she also had the personal hardships of in her family. She had studied. She suffered from depression. So actually, when you weave all of that in, that is what made J.K. Rowling unique. She was also dyslexic, which again, in many instances in business and in creativity, gives you an advantage. Darren Brown, I love Darren Brown stuff. Does anybody read? One of you read the Darren Brown books, don't you? Yeah, and his documentaries where he's looking at the psychology of people are just absolutely brilliant. But you know, Darren Brown, you look at him, he's an artist, he's what he describes as a mentalist, he's a hypnotist, he's a magician. You throw all of those crazy things into one pot and you end up with a very unique proposition. And that is why Darren Brown is so successful. And if you've never been to one of Darren Brown's live performances, I couldn't recommend him more highly. The last one I saw, I've seen him a few times. I've actually been on stage with Darren Brown. But the last one I saw, I still am blown away by what we witnessed that night. So it is absolutely incredible. And we see it in the Business of Endurance podcast repeatedly. So many amazing stories. And I think one message that I would say is one thing that I pick up from the Business of Endurance is it's never too late to pivot. You know, just because you're doing what you're doing today, if you find that your passion and purpose, like me selling Efficient Portfolio and deciding to do business coaching, was because all the passion and purpose had drained out of financial services for me. I'd spent 20 years talking about pensions and retirement and financial planning and cash flow forecasting, and I knew that all my passion had gone for that. So it was time for me to pivot. And, you know, some great stories that we've seen here. I mean, Nikki Spinks, if you're into the fell running scene, she is like the queen of fell running. She's an unbelievable lady. But it wasn't until so there's a thing called the Bob Graham Round where you run the 48 peaks or tops as they call them in the Lake District in a 24-hour period. So she used to have the record for that, but she then went and set the record for doing it a double. So that's there and back in 48 hours. And at one time, I think this is still the case, she's the only, there's three equivalents. There's the Bob Graham in the Lake District, there's the Paddy Buckley in Wales, and then there's the Scottish one, which I can't remember the name of. Ah, thank you. And she is, I think, still the only person to have done a double on all three. But she didn't start doing that until she turned 50, and she actually didn't start doing the doubles until she recovered from cancer. So that was her pivot. Helen Davies, amazing sports psychologist. She was a school teacher until about her 40s. And then she decided, no, I'm not passionate about this, but I am passionate about teaching, but it's sport and it's psychology. Kerry Sutton, our friend who actually crewed for us when we were amazing ultra runner, far better than we are. She crewed for us when we did the ARC 50. Again, she didn't get into ultra running until post-children. And Lisbeth Barnes, amazing ultra runner, won Marathon des Sables several times. She I thought that was you. Well, she's now a sexologist consultant, so I'm like, yeah. So she's definitely pivoted. But like this, it's never too late to pivot, change, and of course, for some people that'll be just to kind of like steer in a different direction. For some people, it might be something completely different. And of course, in sport we see people achieving amazing things. And if I've mentioned the 10,000 hours rule, that, you know, from Bounce and from Anders Ericsson's research, and like countless times, we see it with so many different sporting professionals, and we see it in the podcast. But the more time we spend doing stuff, the more it puts us in a unique position that nobody else can be in. Like when we interviewed Dino, the guy who founded Who, the wetsuit manufacturer, you know, I hadn't realized until we interviewed him that his whole background, he'd been working in triathlon for his whole career, but mostly for running shoe companies and different companies, you know, like selling advertising in triathlon magazines. He'd lived and breathed triathlon for 20 odd years before he decided to found Who. So it's that unique blend of experience, passion, purpose that puts you in a different place to everybody else. And, you know, coming back to that 10,000 hours rule, did anyone actually read, I think it's Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, where he talks about Bill Gates's, you know, why Bill Gates, it's a 1 in a million or 1 in 3 million chance that Bill Gates got to where he got to. Yes, he got his 10,000 hours ahead of everybody else, but it's still a 1 in a million or 1 in 3 million chance. And it's 1 in 3 million because there's probably a million schools that he could have gone to, but he happened to be at the school, or like one of almost no schools in the world that had access to a computer that people could use, and B, they had the foresight to give it away on a timeshare basis. So he had more programming experience at the age of 16 than probably any individual on the planet. But not only that, he was then the only kid or one of him and his two mates, but really primarily the only kid in that school that took the advantage of the programming opportunity. So it put him in a unique place. He got to his 10,000 hours quicker. And of course, the more that we get rid of all of the stuff and we focus on the passion and the purpose piece, the more we create something world-class. Because it's those other things that they erode the talent, they erode the passion. And that's why people as their businesses grow, they gradually become less and less passionate about something, because actually all of that other stuff erodes it. And so finding a way of getting rid of the other things and focusing on your passion and your purpose. I mean, ultimately, I'm saying that having sold Efficient Portfolio, I could have probably merged Efficient Portfolio into a purely coaching business. Essentially, the only bit of that business I wanted to do by that point was coaching. Didn't want to talk about the finances. I didn't want to keep up to date with, but actually that is a different business model. And for regulatory purposes, it's required that I actually know something about finances, which I have no interest in anymore. But it is a highlight as to why having a PA, VA, EA, whatever you want to call it, is the most important employee. It's the first person that you employ. Often people go, oh, I want to expand the business. I'm going to employ another salesperson or another coach or another. No. Employ a PA first and allow them to free you up to do more of the things that you are uniquely talented, uniquely passionate about, uniquely skilled at, because that will make your business far more profitable, and it will reconnect you to the purpose. And I heard a story years and years ago about the fact that there's a kangaroo, a fish, and a monkey all arrive at school on day one, and they're like, right, okay, all right, today we're gonna do swimming class, and the fish is brilliant at the swimming class, but the kangaroo and the monkey are rubbish, and the teachers are like, you guys, you're gonna really work on your swimming. It's not working out well for you here, is it? And then they come on to tree climbing class. Of course, the monkey's brilliant at that, but the monkey doesn't get praised for the tree climbing. It's the other two that go, come on, you really got to work on your tree climbing. And this is how currently our schools are created. They're created to turn people into average of, being average at everything. Whereas really, if we want to become world class at something, we need to narrow it down and go, actually, these are the things that I'm really good at and love. I think 95% of people don't believe that you can make a living out of the thing that you're passionate about. And then 5% of us actually get to do it for fun. We get to do what we enjoy for our living. And that means that you can create incredible value, but it also means that, it never ceases to amaze me how people don't think that is possible. And we've done the Kolbe concept in the past in the workshop. I'm not going to go into it now, but it is a tool that I would refer you back to, because if you go through the report that they send you when you do the Kolbe A concept, for those of you that don't know the Kolbe A principle is, I've done DISC tests and Myers-Briggs and all of these different things, but for building a team and understanding your strengths and weaknesses, for me, this is the best system that I've found. I'd really encourage you to do it. But for those of you who have done it, go back and read that report again, because it will give you a really clear, a better understanding of what it is that is your unique ability. And that unique ability is a term that's coined by a strategic coach. I know some of you have done strategic coach in the past, so you'll understand that. If you really want to spend time drilling down to this, strategic coach do a booklet that they charge, I think it's about 80 quid for, but you can go through the unique ability process. It's really worthwhile. One of the most valuable things that they'll tell you to do, which obviously we can't do today, but you can still do, is write to your best clients, best friends, family members, and ask them, what do you think my unique abilities are? And you can describe what unique ability is. But what is amazing is reading the report, reading the answers that you get back, because people will see things that you don't see or appreciate in yourself. And so I think that's a really powerful exercise to do, is to write out to people. But like I say, if you want to go through it, and the best way to do it is probably putting aside a whole day to do that workbook. But it is an exercise really worth doing. On the back of doing that, one of the things it encouraged, or I can't remember whether it encouraged me or I came up with something else, was to create a piece of art that summed up my unique ability. So this was my AI generated piece of art with my abilities in there. But given that we've already used one Japanese term today, I thought I'd throw another one at you. So ikigai seems to be another term that's being thrown around quite a lot in a lot of business and performance related books. Ikigai is that reason for being, and it's summarized by what you live, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. And it's just, the more we can get in tune with our ikigai, the more value we can create for others. And the last example I'm going to give you from this is from a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big by Scott Adams. Now, Scott Adams is the creator of Dilbert. Has anyone read this book? Great book. I mean, it is so funny. I remember I was running around on a long run listening to it. I was by Rutland Water near near Normanton Church. And I can't remember in what context this came out, but he said, and I farted so loud that my socks inflated. And I just burst out laughing. I mean, anybody coming the other way on the cycle path would have just thought this lunatic running around Rutland Water laughing out loud. But it is a really funny book, brilliant guy. But he actually put it in a really interesting way. And he said there's 20, and I haven't listed all of them, but there's most of them. There's 20 key skills. And he describes it as the talent stack. He says, if you want to be world class at something, you can do it one of two ways. You can either be in the top 1% of what you do, of that one thing, and you're world class. He said that's really, really difficult. Or the other way to do it is to be above average in 3 key areas. Because when you combine those 3 key areas together, you end up with a unique proposition that makes you world class. You know, whether it's, so I would suggest mine are financial planning because of 20 years in experience in that world, are business coaching because of all of the content I've consumed, whether it be, you know, hundreds of books and coaching courses and the coaching that I've attended and benefited from. But also it's fitness and triathlon and endurance sport. So you put those 3 together, and I'm not unique, but in terms of the people that you can stick those 3 things together, I'm probably in the top 1%, which apparently makes me world class. You guys are exactly the same. It's about identifying what those things are.